This is Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
For the first time in it feels like a decade, we have a non-nutso field in PGA for this week. It's the Rocket Mortgage Classic, and things seem pretty much wide up. We're going to talk to Brandon Gdula, getting his read on this course at Detroit Golf Club, breaking down the field for this week and where he sees value, if value exists, over at FanDuel Sportsbook. Welcome on into Covering the Spread. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire, joined here as mentioned by Brandon Gdula. Check him out on Twitter at Gdula13. You can find his work over at numberFire.com, where he is the senior managing editor. Brandon, Rocket Mortgage Classic coming up. But first, Keegan Bradley. You bet on him, just not to win the whole thing. Had a group bet on Keegan, though. So you were on the right guys. You had Brian Harmon, top 20. He finished tied for second. So you were on the right guys last week. Got to feel good heading into this week as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a pretty good season overall. Those are good sort of teachable moments as to, maybe not throwing everything at your outrights. I think also this week in particular, that might be relevant. Kind of a tight week for value. But yeah, I mean, the model largely has been a success this year, and that's always nice to see, because that means I don't have to go in and tinker. I just got to keep updating the data and let it do its thing.
It's nice to get to that point where you're no longer constantly tinkering. I feel like I didn't get there with F1 until 3 weeks ago, and I've been working on that model since fall of 2021. So it's reassuring when you start to feel good about the model in concept, but then also seeing the results of it. And it feels like for you're there with PGA where you can kind of just let things run and see where you see value. And also, the weak spots of it, the strengths of it, and kind of tailor that. And it seems like this year you found your groove with regards to just kind of optimizing what you got.
Yeah. I've messed around with a lot of different models. One of which included, strokes gained level data. And I was trying to bump up the sort of predictability or predictiveness of things strokes gained off the tee is the most predictable of the four strokes gained stats. It's the common example is, long drivers, guys who are gaining strokes off the tee, they're going to be able to do that week over week rather than the best putters who might not, have a few putts fall. Some of the weaker putters can get it going, but they're not going to add 40 yards of distance all of a sudden. So, I tried a lot of different stuff. And then you run into incomplete data. You're trying to impute data for these younger guys, and you can guess really wrong. So yeah, it's really based in adjustments to round by round scoring with enough data in there for things to smooth out. We're going to learn over, a year plus of data with certain weighting who's actually a good golfer. And, as I say every now and then, really what the model does, it does sort of predict who is most likely to win, things like that. But ultimately it just says, based on how good these guys have been, this is probably about how good they're going to be this week. And given that, here's how often they should win. And then it just makes it simple, because what it ultimately helps with is not buying in on super small samples and reacting to 1 or 2 weeks of really great data. Or for someone like a Colin Morikawa, who really struggled last week, it's here to remind us that he's not going to miss the cut every week. And for someone like Justin Thomas, it can be really, really hard to figure out how he's been golfing, try to figure out where he should be. And that's what the model can help us do.
And we're going to talk about JT. We're going to talk about the favorites for this week and get you ready for the Rocket Mortgage Classic here in just 1 second. But first, a reminder to make sure you're subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcast. We are here every weekday breaking down golf, MLB, UFC, NASCAR, and Formula One, both in action this week as well. You can find all those right here on the Covering the Spread podcast feed. If you like what you hear, leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Also, check us out each weekday on the FanDuel YouTube page and on the FanDuel TV Plus app. Baseball season is in full swing, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. So don't miss your chance to get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball trademarks used with permission. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. First online real money wager only. $10 deposit required. Refund issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See full terms at FanDuel.com/sportsbook. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino LLC. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit FanDuel.com/RG in Arizona. 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT-STEP to 53342 in Connecticut. 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat. In Indiana, 1-800-9-WITH-IT. In Wyoming and Kansas, 1-800-522-4700 in Kansas, ksgamblinghelp.com. Louisiana is 1-877-770-STOP. In Massachusetts, gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support. In Massachusetts, Gambling Helpline, I just did that one. Whoops. In Maryland, mdgamblinghelp.org. In New York, 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. And in West Virginia, go to 1-800-GAMBLER.net. Now, as mentioned, this week's Rocket Mortgage Classic is at Detroit Golf Club. Brandon, they've been there a couple of times thus far. So what should we know about the course for this week's event?
Yeah, we've seen this course 4 times now, and if you looked at just the past 3 winners, you would probably have a specific takeaway in terms of what stats matter. Those past winners being Tony Finau in 2022, Cam Davis in 2021, or Cameron Davis, depending on your source. Low-key a spreadsheet ruiner. It's not as bad because you know what the change is going to be, but definitely
like
not
Samuel
helpful.
Stevens or Sam. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, they're small. Matt Neesmith now, Matthew Neesmith, you know, 2 very different players, but and Bryson DeChambeau. So again, that's Tony Finau, Cameron Davis, and Bryson DeChambeau, the past 3 winners at this course. So you would think, okay, driving distance is what matters. And it's not necessarily bared out in the stats that way if you look at the whole field. Nate Lashley won the inaugural event in 2019, of course, after Monday qualifying, one of the better stories in golf in a while back when that was a golf story. Like when that's what we're talking about in golf. But, you know, kind of just average length relative to par. And again, going back to like digging into the details of the stats, it's not like driving distance is an absolute must. What is a must is scoring. The winning scores have been 26 under, 18 under, 23 under, and 25 under. Now, one of the things with just looking at winning scores that can be a little bit misleading is if there were runaways, and we've seen a lot of those. We've seen wins by 6, 5, and 3 shots, and then one of them was a playoff. So, you know, technically those scores look a little bit inflated, but you're going to need to go around 20 under. And frankly, you know, with where golf is currently, it's just getting, in my opinion, worse in terms of how good these golfers are, how far they can hit it. And so I'm kind of thinking it's going to be a little bit more like last week where, yeah, it was a designated event, but a lot of shorter hitters were in play, which, you know, you can also flip as an argument against the fact that we don't need to roll the ball back. Because last week it was, you know, we had some shorter hitters up there. But that's, you know, I'm not going to get into that. I'm just saying, like, the actual scoring relative to par, you're going to have to make a ton of birdies for these outrights to hit. And scoring potential, I mean, scoring like opportunities are tied to obviously greens in regulation or greens in like under regulation. So distance will help in that regard. but it's basically you need to be in position off the tee, not completely off the planet, and then hit your irons well enough to give yourself those birdie and potential eagle looks. So really what I'm looking for, what this course demands is ball strikers who can putt. I think you could make the case for all of those big hitters who can kind of get the putters going. Finau, he's been someone fun to track in terms of regression where he makes a lot of long putts. But again, distance isn't a must. And I think the real takeaway here is that the only archetype that I think is going to have a hard time winning are the really, really awful putters who have really bad, underlying data. And what I mean by that is putting from like 5 to 10 feet or within 15 feet. That's the more predictive range long term. So that's kind of anyone's game. I'm fighting a WWE reference here, but it's pretty much anyone's game this week. Aside from the really bad putters, I think.
And that is a tragedy for us as like old school heat check podcasters, the bad putters, might not be getting there. But let's talk about the top of the odds board for this week over at FanDuel Sportsbook. We do have Tony Finau checking in at 12-1. He is kind of separated a bit with Colin Morikawa, Ricky Fowler at 14-1. Then down just a bit, though, is Justin Thomas. And I wanted to discuss him briefly because Thomas briefly shortened to 14-1 yesterday. Obviously didn't get a lot of bites at 14-1. Is lengthened back out to 18-1. Thomas, I had basically written off before last week, but then did show some life across the weekend, this past weekend. So with Thomas at 18-1, have you seen enough there to consider him at you could say a relatively short number. You could also say if it were like a year ago, this would have been like a disrespectful number to JT in this field. So I think he's fascinating. What do you make of Justin Thomas right now?
Yeah. So it's one of those instances, and I picked that name in particular due to the fact that I knew we were going to talk about him and talk about like how like a model of any sort can sort of help you get an actual sort of realistic gauge. And a model is only as good as the input, so we need to figure out like at what level Justin Thomas should be expected to play this week, and like that's kind of tricky because there were sort of rumblings that he's been hurt, and it would make a lot of sense that his drop was, related to injury of some sort. And that's why I find last week's data really interesting. Digging into just 1 week is generally a bad thing to do, but for someone who potentially, based on the rumors could have been hurt, I think it's a little bit more impactful. And he was second in strokes gained approach for the week at the Travelers, fourth in around the green play, which I will shout out. That's a very fluky stat almost always, but we know that he's a good around the green player long term. The putter though, ice cold for JT. Notably though, he was 13th in driving distance among guys who made the cut, which is a good sign that the health is trending up, or that whatever was sort of holding back his swing is kind of maybe a bit gone. The putting stats, though, are a bit worrisome. He's been a subpar putter from within 15 feet. I have him in the 34th percentile. Even over the past 15 rounds, though, the past 50 rounds, he's 14th in ball striking. So that's a pretty long sample for someone who's been struggling. I will say that he's kind of errant off the tee, which you don't necessarily want for this week. So how I'm going to phrase this with JT is I don't really see enough in him right now to continue doubting him, but I also don't particularly think he's someone I'm targeting this week. I know you kind of made a comment that this number would probably be insulting to JT of old, and like peak JT, yes, but I think it's actually a good enough number currently that I'm still out on Justin Thomas.
So out on him, I think that a lot of times when guys are overvalued, we will like look for group bets against them, look for 3 balls against them. Are you also avoiding those given the prospect that JT is looking better now? I'm asking for myself in case someone else pops up a value in a 3 ball against JT this week specifically.
I I don't think that I would even go so far as to say that I like go out of my way to target, um, like target guys who I think are overvalued, because that can kind of lead me to thinking that other guys are better values than they are. So for me, I'm gonna take like the model way out and say I just model all of the groups
Yeah.
in head to head. So that's all factored in for me.
Yeah.
Um, I think you could probably, if you want to go that way, make a case for it. The real issue is like everyone else is sort of
Well, I think that
over.
my bigger question was like, if you showed value in a 3-ball against JT, would you worry the model was undervaluing him to the point where you would avoid taking that value?
So I do use the past year of data. I weight recent rounds. I could see the case for that.
Okay.
I thought you were coming at it from an angle of like attacking golfers who I think are overvalued.
Yeah. It's more so like because like I use data golf stuff, and I felt like in the majors sometimes the live guys, given their weird sample, could be undervalued in 3 balls. So if there was a golfer in a 3-ball with a live golfer, I might not take the value out of fear that those other golfers are being a bit undervalued. And like I'm not sure from there with JT where he might be undervalued by a model, but like that's kind of like the thought process I'm going with is like fearing that to an extent. So we're not in on Justin Thomas at 18-1. Are there any outrights you do like this week at FanDuel Sportsbook?
So I'm gonna have to do some audibles on the fly here, based
Uh-oh.
on how the odds have shifted since I took my notes for this, because I had Colin Morikawa. I was gonna go back on the get some Cowabunga action at 18-1, but now that he's at 14, I don't see it. I mean, I don't hate it. I have him around like
Yeah.
16-1.
Yeah.
So
Not
again,
a value anymore.
yeah, it's one of those situations. Things have shifted around. I'm also really close with Ricky Fowler. I have him around 16-1 as well. He's 14. So I would at least say, you know, uh, just a spoiler alert. There's not a whole lot I love this week based on how the odds are falling as of Tuesday morning. So I would say at least keep an eye on Morikawa and Fowler. I think if you can get them at like 16 or longer, if they shift here on FanDuel Sportsbook, that's appealing. But again, on the fly, I'm going to go with Sungjae Im here. 22-1. His odds were, what were they here? Well, I don't have, well, I do, but I don't want to waste time. Sungjae Im is kind of someone I lump in with Colin Morikawa often. I find that they're pretty similar archetypes, but that's actually kind of unfair to Morikawa because Morikawa is one of the best iron players that we've ever seen. And I still have like a thought process with Sungjae Im where when he came onto the tour, we thought he was going to be a great iron player, and that's really not his strength. His strength is like being neutral with the irons and being really quite good at everything else. Over the past 50 rounds, he's 7th in strokes gained off the tee, according to Data Golf, 15th around the green, and 20th in putting. So top 10 in everything. And a course where, yes, I want iron play to lead to birdie chances. It's an easy enough course where that kind of takes away the importance of being super precise with the irons in the first place, even though the greens are a bit small. They're not like tiny. So I think Sungjae Im at 22 is now where I would start if I was starting from what we're looking at right now.
So if you were able to get Morikawa or Fowler 16-1 or longer, I think the 18 number is probably a bit more appealing to get some more cushion.
Yeah.
There's Sungjae Im 22-1 right now at FanDuel Sportsbook for the outrights. Any other outrights you are considering here, or is it just primarily Im for you?
Let me see where. So I had a long time of, or a long process of looking for value, and I didn't quite update things. But JJ Spawn's still 60-1. I think that's an appealing number. He does qualify as someone who I would classify as a subpar putter, but he's not completely horrible. And that should appeal to us because he's a top 30 ball striker among the field. He has also been top 32 at this course in all 4 years. He's one of 2 golfers in this field to make all 4 cuts at this event, Scott Stallings being the other. I think that this is going to be one of those courses where there's a lot of flukiness in terms of how past history kind of defines how you play the course, because it is pretty like, I don't want to call it just a putting contest, but stroke like if you go back, I think Nate Lashley was second in strokes gained putting. I think Bryson was first. I think Cam Davis and Finau were both top 15 with really good around the green numbers too, like abnormally high. So like it was kind of a short game competition. So I don't think that we're going to see a ton of like predictiveness necessarily in terms of course history, but whenever you have it and you have someone who's a good iron player, who maybe due for a little bit of positive putting regression, I'd buy into that. And then I would just keep an eye on Lee Hodges. He's 100-1, 110-1. I like him a bit better as maybe a sprinkle there. So you don't have to jot that one down officially, but he's a really good ball striker and an accurate driver. I think he could do worse at, this is the kind of course where you can take a long shot. I believe Cam Davis was 100-1 when he won this. Shout out Cam Davis because I liked him that week. But I think like this is
like 250. I think when he won.
This is the kind of week where a long shot can be in contention. So maybe a sprinkle on Lee Hodges.
And with JJ Spawn, he has some like nightmare weeks on the greens, but he's not like consistently always losing as a putter. Like it's just kind of like he has like these nightmare scenarios. So like the overall numbers look bad, and they're bad. He's not a good putter, but it's not like Scheffler where you just kind of bake in like a little bit lost on the greens no matter what. He can have weeks where he's actually okay in that regard as well.
He's around a 30th percentile putter from within 15 and from beyond 15 this season. Again, that's not like red flag, like sound the alarms territory, but it's not necessarily exactly what you want. Then again, if his tee to green game is on, I mean, he can lead this field in particular in tee to green.
Okay, so Sung J M is Brandon's favorite outright, 22-1. Considering JJ Spawn 60-1, and then maybe Lee Hodges 110-1 if you want to have a sprinkle there on a long shot as well. Let's look at the non-outrights now, Brandon. Any of those catching your eye over at FanDuel Sportsbook?
Well, I had this before pivoting to Sungjae to win, but Sungjae M top South Korean is plus 150. I'm not seeing Tom Kim listed, so just take note of that. I have Sungjae M then in this one at even money.
Mm-hmm.
Can you find it?
Nope. I've given up. I don't see it, so we're just gonna pretend it's there.
Okay.
I think I know where to find it, but it's gonna be a lot of work, and it's not worth the effort to find it. So just go ahead and you can
go to schedule. Go to schedule here.
I don't want it, man. This is so much effort.
I think it's close to the bottom, maybe.
Fair enough.
Okay. Well, I laid out the case for liking Sungjae M. And again, with I think you scrolled past it, but
did I?
Yeah.
This is why podcasting should be only a visual medium. There we go. Finally.
I know there's a lot of hype for Byung-Hun On or Ben On again, but realistically, Sungjae is the right play here at plus 150. So,
are you saying that you don't want to go Ben On in a putting contest?
I would not want to do that. I'd rather go with Sungjae Im, who is again top 20 in putting with, I believe, some of the better. Yeah, he's an 84th percentile putter from within 15 feet, which you absolutely love to see. And he's 20th percentile on long putts, which means he's probably due for some regression, getting some of those longer putts to fall while maintaining the consistency within 15 feet. So love to see that. And then the only other thing I could find, and I modeled out all these groups and stuff, Christian Bezuidenhout, top South African, plus 175. I have that one around plus 150 for Bezuidenhout. He's the only one for me over the past year with all my adjustments with a positive strokes gain trend in my model. He's at a plus 0.55, which doesn't necessarily move the needle from an outright standpoint, but compared to, I think it's 7 total golfers, maybe 6 total golfers in this group, to have him be the only one positive. He came out to be a value when I simmed this one out. So I like Bezuidenhout, top South African, plus 175 at a course that should really fit him pretty well due to the fact that he's just such a good short game player.
And the other one again was Sungjae, top South Korean, plus 150. Tom Kim not currently listed there, so account for that. If Kim is added to this market later on, then obviously change course there and reevaluate the odds. But at least as of right now, Sungjae a value at plus 150. That is all that we have here for today on Covering the Spread, breaking down the Rocket Mortgage Classic. So, Brandon, I want to thank you, as always, for swinging by today, spreading your knowledge about the PGA Tour, talking my favorite values. I appreciate it, as always, and good luck to you once again this week.
Yeah, love coming on to talk golf. Not necessarily my favorite week, not necessarily like my favorite event to watch, but it should be a good one to track anyway, because tracking golf is always more fun than I think, just because, you know, it's golf.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It can be a lot of fun even when it's not at its peak, for sure. You can find Brandon on Twitter at Gdula13. I am on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JimSannes. As a reminder, make sure you're subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. If you like what you hear, leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and check out the FanDuel YouTube page and FanDuel TV Plus. We are back once again tomorrow. Good luck to you, whatever you're betting for Tuesday night. We'll talk to you again soon. This has been Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.